Success isn't achieved alone. It's built on connections, collaboration, and a shared vision. I'm Alex Ponce. In this episode, we meet Dr. Alex George, a transformational leader whose journey began on another continent and led to an extraordinary corporate career here in the United States. From spearheading talent and leadership development to giving back through education, Dr. George exemplifies how fostering strong teams and empowering the next generation can create a lasting impact. So good morning, Dr. Alex George. How are you?
I'm doing great, Alex.
How was your drive in?
Drive was fantastic. I was surprised coming into Miami. It wasn't bad traffic.
You're about the only person on earth who's ever said that, because everyone I talk to, it's a disaster area. So I'm glad it worked out for you.
Maybe I was lucky.
You are a very lucky person. That I do know for a fact. So we're here today in order to do a masterclass on you, to find out what makes you tick as a successful person and what advice you could give to other individuals that are either entering the workforce or pivoting into a new direction. It's always good to hear from people that have already made it, have already taken that journey and done it well. So I wanted to start at the beginning. So why don't you tell me about how you began in your career? What was your first employer scenario, and what you experienced there as an employee for the first time dealing with life?
Absolutely, Alex. But first of all, thank you for having me here. Happy to share some of my experience and insights, with you as well as with the students and the team as well. So my very first job was actually in sales and marketing, and I think that was kind of like a very, very good experience for me, because I wasn't really the outgoing person in school and college. I never participated in any competitions, plays, or anything like that. And really, I was thrown into the workforce, kind of like out of choice, for lack of better terms. I needed to work.
Okay.
So getting into sales and marketing kind of really helped me to become more confident speaking to customers, clients. And it was my very first job application, and I got successful at it. So they accepted me as a sales representative, and I used to sell pharmaceutical products.
Okay.
So going into doctor's office, meeting with them, meeting with pharmacists nationwide, and selling these products. I think I did that for about 3.5 years. But that really kind of gave me more confidence and really helped me get out of my shell that I was in for the last, 10, 15 years in school and college. And I think that is kind of the foundation of what really led me to where I am today.
So this was your first job?
This was my very first job.
Right off the bat, right in the deep end.
Correct. I saw an advertisement on newspaper. This is many years ago. And I applied and they called me and I went in and I gave my best shot and I got the job.
What was that first week like?
The first week was really great because this was a brand new company. It was a division of an already established pharmaceutical company. Okay. But it was a new division. So we were all kind of like huddled in and into a corporate learning center. Right. And we spent the next 2 weeks really getting to know what these products were. So we were comfortable with the knowledge of the product so we can go and sell it, because selling is more about product knowledge, right? It's again about customer relationships. So the first 2 weeks were really good, meeting with your coworkers, building relationships, the camaraderie. I still connect with a lot of people on LinkedIn. They're all in different countries across the globe. Right. But that was really, really one of the most memorable experiences, I would say.
Okay, but do you have a medical background?
I don't, but my major was in chemistry, so that really helps me.
you have enough of a foundation that you would understand the basics of it.
Yeah.
All right, so you're working there, you're doing sales and marketing. I'm assuming within that period of time, you didn't stay in the same position. You probably rose through the ranks somehow. So explain that process, because a lot of people think, I want to get into leadership, but maybe someone will give me the position. And that's not exactly how it works. So at first, you're a salesperson, in effect. How did you transition, or did you transition in that company?
I did transition a little bit, because I had spent about 3 years with the company. Okay. And I come from the mentality that I shouldn't be in a position for too long. Right. And this is an open secret. So,
well, tell us why.
Because that's just my personality. I like doing different things.
Okay.
And I cannot be put into a box. That's just who
That's
I am.
a you thing. Okay.
That's a me thing, right? So I need to be challenged. I need to do things that are bigger and different, you know. And I've stayed with the same companies for many years, but I've been challenged to do something different. So within this particular very first job, I took on more responsibilities in terms of areas and territories that I know that was not given to me.
Okay.
So when they were launching this product into a new region, I volunteered and said, you know what, hey, this is something that is very close to the region that I cover. I could perhaps go into this region twice a month and kind of establish the products in that region and so on. So I always asked for a little bit more. And that helped with, I think, job security wasn't the number one thing on my mind, but I think it helped with job security. Right. It helped building relationships. It helped me become one of the top salespeople in the company. So there was a lot of added benefits, but it wasn't really for more money or for more position or something. I just wanted to do something more than the average person.
So you will get more money if you're handling more clients and more territory, but that wasn't the primary goal. That's just like a benefit, a perk of that.
Yeah, that was more of an afterthought.
The relationships, that's interesting. So in you expanding your territory and you dealing with different vendors and different customers, you're expanding your what we used to call the Rolodex, your network, your LinkedIn, if you will, at the time. How did that benefit you on a day-to-day basis? Because obviously you know who your clients are. You're going to them, you're talking to them, you're sending them messages, emails, faxes, whatever the case. How did that help out over the term of the 3 years, though, building those relationships?
I think relationship is the number one, the most important thing that's out there. Whether you're in sales and marketing, whether you're working in any corporate job, or whether you are in academia, wherever it is, like relationship is the number one thing. And I say this because we were tasked with building a brand new company.
Right.
I mean, the only credit that we had was that we were a division of an already established organization. So we had some legacy attached to it, right? We had some goodwill in the market, but it was all about the challenge of building a new product. And again, keep in mind, my history, this is all happening in India, in Bombay, right? I mean, this is not the United States. It's a very different environment culturally. So the physicians would not write your product or would not prescribe your organization's product immediately.
Okay.
But I was, not to toot my own horn, but I was able to really change that in many scenarios. I still vividly remember my area sales manager coming with me as a new person, helping me coach my sales transactions and my selling spiel and pitch and so on. Right. And he used to tell me like, hey, what this doctor is not going to write. He never writes a prescription to any new salesperson. It takes at a minimum of like 3 to 4 months. You need to visit him and again and show him the loyalty and the commitment that you are interested in this company. You believe in the product. You believe in him. Only then he will write. And believe it or not, he wrote a prescription on the very first visit that I had. I don't know how.
I think that was a you thing.
I don't know. I'll probably take the credit, but I don't know what happened. But that did happen.
Okay.
So that was a very, very unique thing because, and this is an area sales manager who's very well experienced in that territory. He knows the physicians. He used to work for, obviously, a different company and was new to this company as well. So I think it's all about how you really present yourself, just being genuine, right? I have made many mistakes in my sales job, right? I mean, I can vividly remember the very first mistake that I made. Right. I never had the right first impression, for lack of better terms.
How so?
Because I'm meeting with this physician for the very first time. Right. And, once you do your sales pitch, you're supposed to give the physician a sample of your product. Right. Hey, this is a product, right? I mean, this happens in the United States too, for you to, try it on your patients or give it to someone who is, who can't afford the medicine and so on. So I do the sales pitch. It's a very, you don't have a lot of time to do the sales pitch because there are patients waiting outside and so on. So I do the sales pitch and I just walk out. I never gave him the product. And this is a very new product in the market. He has never seen it. It's not available everywhere. So obviously the goal was to give him the product so that he can try it on his patients and give me feedback. And then once you get good reviews, you can start prescribing. But I realized like after 5 minutes walking down the street, oh my God, I never gave him the product. I realized it. I came back, I knocked the door, excused myself, and see if it was okay to get in. He said, yeah, please come in. I gave him the product and walked out. It's okay to make mistakes. That was my very, very first sales call with that particular physician, and I still remember that.
Do you think that it endeared you to him and vice versa by having that vulnerable moment of a mistake? Because it seems like an obvious mistake.
Correct.
And yeah, I don't know about you, but my experience has been that when someone immediately acknowledges an error, they don't have to say it, but they acknowledge it in their own way. And then they try to rectify it immediately. It humanizes them. And immediately
Exactly.
I'm like, I want to deal with that person because I make mistakes too.
Exactly.
All right.
And that's been one of my silent mantra behind the scenes. I tell my team all the time, it is okay to make mistakes. We learn from our mistakes. We can improvise on it. We're humans. And the funny joke that I tell my team is like, we are not operating on human beings, right? We are not physicians, thank God, right? So it's okay to make a mistake, right? We can always come back and delete the slide. We can represent it. We can ask for forgiveness, right? It's okay to be vulnerable, I think. But that makes you a genuine person. And I think the 3 years that I was successful in that job was just because of pure customer relationships. I had very good colleagues of mine who are still friends with me, who had way better product knowledge than I did, who knew the market more than I do. Like they knew all the new products that were coming up in the market. They were really on top of it. I wasn't. But I think, end of the day, it's all about relationships.
Do you think your personality, what makes you unique, helped you? Or was it something that you were doing that perhaps can be taught? Because everybody wants to be a success in what they do, but by default, not everyone can be number one. So what do you think were the characteristics that helped you be that number one in your position, in your territory, in your area, compared to the next person that perhaps had better knowledge?
I think it's being genuine, right? It's just really liking what you do as well, because I'll be honest with you, there was a time after 3 years that I grew tired of the job.
Okay.
And I said, like, you know what? I don't see myself doing sales and marketing for the next 25 years or 30 years, right? And I had to kind of pause and reflect back and see, like, what do I want to get out of life? So the day I thought that sales and marketing is not for me, this is not something that I want to do, I was true and honest to myself. I tendered my resignation. Of course, I prepared for it, right? I had plans to go to hotel school. So, I wanted to do hotel management from a chemistry background. So I was prepared. I had plans, but I wasn't kind of like faking anything.
Okay.
And I think being genuine, I think that's very important. So, and again, when I did not know something, I was very vulnerable again. I said, you know what, let me get back to you on that. And I'll find out the information, or, there is a product expert within our company. We can definitely get the information from that person to you.
Okay.
So I think, yes, you can prepare, but again, just being genuine, being honest. And again, these are not cliche words, right? But I think it definitely adds a lot. And I think this has helped me a lot in my life, And I was giving this example to my coworkers yesterday. We moved offices, believe it or not, yesterday. So all for the good, right? We went from a very good office to a very, very good office.
So you upgraded.
Upgraded, and I'll take it. Now I have a window and a beautiful view and so on. So we were, after all the hard work, we were sitting down and we were chit-chatting, and I was telling them about reflecting back on one of my experiences in Dubai, where I used to work. And I had applied for a position as a training and quality officer. Okay. That was my very first break coming into HR, into human resources, because, this sales and marketing was great. Then I did hotel management, and, I did hotel management HR in Dubai.
Okay.
And, I was working in a different department, and I saw this position as a training and quality officer. Okay. And I was hired. And, I applied, and I had applied for a couple of positions, and I did not get it. And, they gave me feedback, and this is what you need to improvise. I improvised on it.
What industry was the business in?
This was hotels.
It was hotels.
It was hotels. And but I really took those criticism or feedback, whatever you want to say, to heart, really worked on it. And I applied for this position as a training and quality officer with that organization in Dubai. And my mentor / boss at that time, she hired me. And, and I did, she taught me everything about HR, about training and development and so on. And it's about 2 years down the line when she decides to leave the organization.
Okay.
And, we have a farewell party for her. And I still remember this is in a 5-star hotel called as Dusit Dubai.
Okay.
And Dusit is a Thai chain of luxury hotels. And we are sitting on, I believe, the 51st floor or something, having dinner, bidding goodbye to her. And she said to me, Alex, I don't know whether you know this, but now that I'm leaving, I need to tell you this. I did not hire you because your presentation was fantastic or because you had great skill set or something. I hired you because you walked too fast.
You walked too fast?
Yes. And I said, her name is Debbie. And I said, Debbie, what's me walking too fast got to do with getting a job?
Right.
And she said, you know what, Alex, I've seen you for the last 8 to 9 months because her office was close to my office, right? You are always in emotion. You have something on your mind. You're running. You are on a mission. And I figured out someone who is walking too fast cannot be a lazy person.
True.
So I was willing to take you on board. I was willing to mentor you, teach you everything because that department itself was a new department.
Okay.
So again, I never had this on my mind, right? I wasn't walking too fast because I'll get a job in 6 months from now.
That's just the way you are.
It's just the way I am.
Okay.
It's just being genuine, personable, working with a mission, I think, right? And people notice you. So you're not trying to make a mark around, but I think people observe you and, But that was an interesting story because I desperately needed that job.
Yeah.
I had a job, but I wanted to transition and do something different. So that was a very important break for me. And I knew I was in a very good competition with another internal candidate.
Okay.
So it was very important for me to secure that particular job, right? But it turned out I got the job. So I was very happy with the outcome.
So she left, and so I can understand this correctly, you were able to go into her position? Or?
No, I was not able to go into her position, but I was able to move into a different role.
But it was facilitated as a result of the experience with her.
Correct, yeah.
Well, I would imagine it's bittersweet because you obviously had a relationship with her, but as many people in that situation would also feel a bit of apprehension or fear because in a way they're your biggest cheerleader, your biggest advocate. So what happens when your biggest advocate leaves, whether because of retirement or some other position? I mean, how did you take the news when you first heard that she was leaving?
I was very, very concerned. I was very, I wouldn't say upset. I was happy for her. She was moving into a much bigger position, working for an international hotel chain in Europe. So that was a very good news for her. Right?
Yeah, exciting for her.
I was excited. I was very happy for her. And she was a very, very good leader, a great mentor. So, I was sad to see her go.
Right.
But she was also able to help set up the stage for my future success as well, making sure that everything that I had worked for was credited so that whoever comes into the position, whoever takes her position, knew about all the achievements and credits and work that I had done for the organization and so on. I mean, this was essentially kind of like a startup department, for lack of better terms. We were building from ground up.
Well, you seem to have that. You're like a magnet for that because the previous position was a startup subdivision of an established company. So let me ask you this. You left that first role that you spoke of in sales and marketing. You get tired. I mean, anybody who does the same thing for a long time, you're starting to feel, the edges of that position. And you start looking for ways to shift it or change it, even if it means relocating to another employer. They say that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. Was that a factor in any way from your first position when you left? Like, perhaps maybe your expectations were a little bit different than those that were supervising you because, expectations also shift over time. All of a sudden you're looking for expansion and maybe they're looking for retraction. Sometimes those little things happen and it affects your decision making. Was it just simply that, been there, done that, or was there something else, human resource related, that people can relate to when they hear this story? Because I hear it all the time. I'm done doing this role. And you ask, well, this is all you studied. This is all you've done. You've been at the place for 10, 15, 20 years. Then you find out, oh, well, there was a new manager that came in and you couldn't see eye to eye. Or the policies of the company change and now they're incompatible. Like, for example, what's happening now. A lot of people are asked to return to work, to the office.
Yes.
And yet now they've restructured their entire personal life to be at home. So now there's an open conflict. So I was just wondering if that was, like, what was the source of that, if you'd like to share?
It wasn't really the leadership or anything like that. I mean, I think there were I know there were a couple of instances in my career, so my career of like 25 plus years, I've been very, very blessed that I had great leaders and great cultures that I worked for. But there have been a couple of cases where, I thought, there was a conflict of interest or the alignment of values were not exactly the same. And again, like I told you at the very beginning, it is my nature to be very truthful to what I do. So if the alignment of the organization is different from what I'm envisioning or what my personal values, my vision is, then I think it's better to part ways. There is no point in staying somewhere where you're not going to be happy. I think that's very important, so that's always been on my back of my mind. And I've made moves depending on that. But, my career moves all the time were not because I did not align with the company values or something.
It's always more.
It's
right?
always been more. It's more for the growth and the strategic, part of it. Like, where do I see myself? And believe it or not, like maybe except for one person, I've been very, very good friends with all my CHROs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And these are CHROs spread across the globe, right? I mean, my mentor is actually in Australia right now. So she works in Australia, takes care of Australia and the Middle East market and so on. Do I talk to her every day? No. Maybe once a year? Yes. But is she in the back of my mind? Absolutely.
But that once a year conversation is a really good conversation.
Yes. And you can ask me the date of birth or the birthday. I'll tell you right now.
Wow.
I won't share it publicly, but I think that means a lot, right? And even my most recent CHRO that, I worked with, with Hilton, I stay in touch with her. We bounce off ideas. We're friends, we're colleagues outside of work. So I think I have heard exactly what you said. Like, people don't leave the jobs, they leave managers and so on.
Right.
Doesn't need to be true all the time. I mean, you are happy with your manager, you're happy with the organization, but you got to move because something else is there. Like, I was very, very happy in one of my jobs many, many years ago. Very happy, great leader. The organization was fantastic and so on. But there was nothing much happening that would take my career to the next level.
Okay.
So, I did everything right. I wasn't actively looking. I was passively in the market. I got something and it was an exciting opportunity. So I took it, but I did it very gracefully.
Okay.
I gave more than the required 2 weeks notice to my team, to my leader, stayed, in touch with them. And when there was an opportunity to come back, when there was an opportunity in a leadership role at that particular organization, they called me and I got the job.
That's a sign of respect.
Yes. So altogether, if you look at the entire duration that I spent with the company, this is a very, very top hospitality company in the United States. I've been with them for 11 years. Okay. So I did leave for a short period of time, but I came back to them. And I think that really shows the goodwill that I had built, the customer relationships, right? And again, I never burnt any bridges when leaving. My whole motivation of leaving that organization at that time was there is nothing available there. I'm hungry as far as my career is concerned. There is something that has been presented to me. So I'm leaving to take that. And believe it or not, Alex, I actually came as I was working in that job full-time, the new job. I actually came back a couple of Saturdays to train the new hire.
Wow.
I didn't have to do that.
I was going to say, that's probably, very generous of you.
I did it for the CHRO because she was a gem of a leader and a person. So I think, again, it's leadership, right? It's relationships that you built with the person that I did it. I didn't do it for the organization. I did it for that person. But she has a new person on board. And how do I help her bring this person up to speed? Because I believe there's a lot of knowledge that is like tacit knowledge that is in your brain. I mean, you have a lot of knowledge, right? Not everything is put down on a piece of paper.
Of course.
So when you leave the organization, no matter how awesome of a handover you provide,
there's always something else.
There is always something that only that person can provide.
Tell me about your feelings, now that you brought it up, about resignations. It's almost like a will and testament. People know they exist, but they don't like to talk about it all the time because for some odd reason, they think they'll somehow draw attention. But it's just as important as being hired. What are your feelings on the proper protocol of how to resign? And I ask this because some people, especially now thanks to the quiet resignation of COVID that it's inspired, in my opinion, it's accelerated because I think it was existing from before. People have taken this position that an employer can fire you in 1 day, so why should you give them 2 weeks? Why is there an imbalance in the protocol? Because not everyone is offered severance pay for a few months or a year. Not everyone is given, a golden parachute. So what is the explanation you would give to someone that says, I want to resign, I don't know how to resign. If it were up to me, I'd tell the person I quit and walk out the door. What would be your response to that person?
I mean, it depends on the person, but I would definitely say that do the right thing, which is definitely give your employer the time. I mean, I can definitely see from the employer's perspective, not justifying that, why these things happen in corporate America, right? Why there is little to no notice, and there is a lot of reasons. I'm sure you're aware of it. I'm aware of it. And again, people, it's transparent out there. But I think it's the right thing to do because, I always value the people who brought me into the organization. And in most cases, people took a chance on me. I went from, and I'll answer your question in a minute, but I went from spending 11 years in hospitality to healthcare. And I spent, my most recent experience, other than from the company I'm working right now, was in healthcare. So I spent about 2.5 years in healthcare. Right. So 11 years in hospitality in the United States to a brand new sector, healthcare, right? So the CHRO of the healthcare organization and the CEO took a chance on me, right? Like, hey, we believe he has the right skill set. They wanted someone with not necessarily with a hospitality background, but there's a lot of transferable skills from hospitality to healthcare, believe it or not, right? So we want someone, and I don't know, they probably saw something in me, I don't know. So I'm happy to be there. I went there. It was a very big learning curve for me but I adapted very fast, right? And that's why I think one of my biggest strength, if I can toot my own horn, is I adapt immediately. So I went from hospitality to healthcare. And when it was time to leave that particular organization, more for family reasons, because that organization was based in New York, and I needed to spend more time home with my family and so on. So it was nothing against the job, there was nothing against the organization. I needed to be here.
That happens. Externalities, things
Correct,
from the outside world.
Absolutely, right? So again, I did very gracefully. I gave 3 weeks of notice. Oh, wow. And I stayed back with the organization as a consultant. Not that I will make, oh my God, 10 grand a year or something, but I volunteered to be there I can be on per diem or a consultant. So whenever there is something that comes up, just give me a call, just send me an email. And they graciously agreed to that and said because that market is a little difficult market. You don't get talent very easily. So it's, and again, you have to advertise, you have to find the right person. And getting people is very difficult these days. The right people is very difficult, right?
Well, that happened to me at the last place I was at, the last firm I was with. I've been with them for 19 years.
Wow.
And so when the time came that I made the decision I was going to retire from law and this was going to be my last place working in a formal research capacity, I gave the person 4 or 5 months notice because there were no bridges to be burnt. There was no animosity. It was merely the time to move in a different direction, which is when I went for my graduate studies. And that excess time was necessary because there's so much knowledge that I could have all the manuals in the world. It's not going to help anybody that comes in, and the poor associate attorney that took over my position, I'm sure spent months just trying to figure out the little nuances
the dots and so on.
And how the clients are, because knowing how clients
Yes.
is so important. You could have the relationship, but there's no way for you to tell somebody else that in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
So your resignation story really strikes a nerve in a good way, and I'm glad that you mentioned that.
So I stayed as a consultant for 6+ months with them until they found someone.
Okay, 6 months is a long time.
Yes, but I wasn't working full time, right?
Sure.
I mean, I was just like, hey, there is something that came up, so, can you help us with this, and I used to work in the nights, so
Okay.
there was no conflict of interest or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, 6 months is a very respectable amount of time.
Yeah.
No one can ever
But again-
question you've left that bridge solid.
Correct. But again, it was me giving back to the two people that took a chance on me.
Mhm.
And again, I think that's personal ethics. So again, it could be different for everybody.
All right. So you transitioned to leadership roles. In a lot of the places, I mean, you seem to start somewhere, but you seem to also quickly move up. You find your home in whatever department you seem to be at, in whatever company you're at. So tell me about that transition journey into leadership. How has it developed for you? And if you could give me 2 or 3 examples, because not every place is the same. Some places you are being hired to be the manager or the director or the VP. Other places you're hired to, be in a support position and you somehow find your way going up the ladder. Tell me about your experiences reaching leadership positions.
So I think it's all about, again, seeking those opportunities, right? So, the very first job not the first job, but, one of the opportunities that I had in leadership role was, to be a training manager.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was no direct reports at that time. So it was a manager level position. It was a leadership position.
In
for
title.
In title,
Mhm.
but there were no direct reports.
Okay.
And I always say that there are two different things. Managing people, like I tell my children all the time, managing people is the biggest challenge, and challenge in a good way, right? I mean,
Mhm.
We are all humans. We behave differently. We have different personalities. We have different beliefs and attitudes, work ethics, and so on. But how do you as a leader manage this team and make sure they're going in the right direction, right? The
Right.
direction that the company is headed to.
Mhm.
I think that's the biggest challenge for a leader.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily creating great trainings. Obviously, those things are important,
Mhm.
but making sure that the people are managed correctly and they all unified and going in the right direction. So I think that's a skill set that you acquire over a period of time.
Okay.
And also you seek out those opportunities as well. So I remember that this position had no direct reports,
Right.
and I had expressed an interest, like, hey, to my leadership team, like, I would be interested in managing people as well, because, I know this is a leadership position. How do I get that experience of managing someone?
Mhm.
So, I remember that I got a 0.5%, 0.5 person, meaning half of a person.
Yes, it's not even a full person.
It's not even a full person. So the logic is like, hey, there is one person who is actually, say, for example, a coordinator
Mhm.
and handling XYZ tasks or department.
Right.
And she is, or he or they are going to split the position between what they do and what you want in your area as well.
Okay.
Right? So that is a good exposure. So you're not managing the person fully. You're kind of like co-managing or co-leading the person along with a more seasoned leader.
Okay.
All right. So that is kind of like, that helps you kind of like, be a manager, be a leader,
Mhm.
without the full responsibilities of managing a person, if that makes sense.
Before you continue, side note, how did you deal with conflicts of scheduling and purpose for that individual? Because my understanding has been that when more than one person manages the same employee, it's usually a recipe for disaster, because you need that person to do something for you right now, but that other person feels entitled to say, well, it's my turn to use them. What do you do?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that kind of conflict? I only say it because you just mentioned it right now.
No, that's a great question. And I think it's all about managing priorities. And, it's not like one person is more important than the other.
Right.
What is a project that takes the most, priority, right?
Mhm.
And, say, for example, the person is managing benefits and it's during the open enrollment period. Maybe
Sure.
that is something that takes more priority than learning and development, right? Which can wait for some time,
Right.
So I think that mutual respect and trying to understand what the priorities are,
Mhm.
I think it's important. And just level setting and having a straight talk with the other leader,
Okay.
making sure that, how many days in a week do you need this person? Well, I need 3 days. Okay, that's fine. My I don't have too much that I need from this person. So 2 days a week for me is perfectly fine.
Right.
What days work for you? Oh, I need them on Monday for sure because it's the first day back in the office. Absolutely, have it on a Monday.
Okay.
I can take that person on a Thursday or a Friday. I think having some of those dialogues and kind of like tweaking as, one of the things that I recently learned in my organization is WOW, ways of working. I never knew this acronym before.
Okay.
So I think now I can speak for ways of working, but I think it's all about the ways of working, and you tweak that, you improvise on it, and as time goes by. So I never had any major concerns. We all worked as a team, of course. But again, I think you were in the right department as well,
Right.
Sometimes, it could be a severely matrixed organization and there could be conflicts, of scheduling and so. But I think that's, again, if you don't have, and again, not every position has the luxury of those direct reports. There are many positions out there that could sound like a leadership role, but you don't have a direct report.
Right. I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
You've already earned the right to a certain amount of compensation, but the company doesn't want to give you that compensation because that compensation is associated to the title. So then you say, fine, give me the title, and then I'll take the compensation. And they'll be like, fine, only to find out that this position that's 3 levels up actually has 3 levels of nothingness underneath because there's nobody you're reporting to, or that is reporting to you, rather. So what's another experience that you've had trying to get into leadership where perhaps it wasn't that direct? Perhaps you tried to go for it and you're up against somebody else, or for some reason you don't get it, because that also happens. People want the role, it's sitting right there, and for some reason it's elusive or it's just not for you. And that's usually where the person leaves for another company that will give them that position. Has that occurred to you? Or like something close approximating?
Not necessarily, but I can give you something different that probably aligns with this particular question.
Yeah.
I had applied for a position many years ago in healthcare.
Okay.
While I was still in hospitality, I had applied for a position in healthcare. Again, a very well-renowned healthcare organization in the United States. And I believe, from what I understand from the recruiting team and the people, the panels and so on, I was probably one of the top 3 or 4 people, So again, there's competition out there. And, I did not get the job, and that's fine. Things happen. But it never held me back in saying that, I've given up on healthcare because breaking into a new industry is very difficult because you're typecast.
Of course.
No matter what your skill set is. I mean, I had a doctorate degree at that time. I mean, so, what else can I do, right? I mean, I have an MBA, I have a doctorate in business administration, with specialization in talent development. My dissertation is focused on what your priorities are, right? What else can I do to prove you that I'm the best candidate out there? How else can I sell you? And again, they go with someone else. Again, that's fine. Someone else has almost similar rank, credentials. Okay. Maybe more healthcare background or something. But I did not let that kind of deter me. And and as I saw opportunities that aligned with what I wanted to do, I kept pursuing it. And that's, I believe, one of the reasons why I was able to break into the healthcare market.
Do you believe in the concept that there's a dream job, or do you believe that you can make whatever job you're in your dream job if you have the right mindset for it? Because I know people that they don't get into one of the big 3 law firms or the big 3 consulting firms, and that's it. Their career's over. What else are they going to do?
Or they get into it and they find it completely opposite to what they had anticipated.
Exactly.
I've heard about that as well.
Expectations. They want you on call 24 hours a day.
I'm working 80 hours a week or something, So very different from what they had in mind.
Right. So how do you feel about that? That are there dream jobs that no matter how you think about it, it's perfect, or like we're talking about that it's probably what you make of it once you're inside?
Yeah, I believe in more of the latter. I think there are still dream jobs out there, maybe in niche markets, niche areas, like maybe your dream job is to be an astronaut.
Yeah, there's only
that's a very specialized area, right?
Yeah, right.
So maybe that's your dream job, but in a dream area where you want to be in. But you could be working as an astronaut maybe for more than 2 companies or maybe you have one particular company that you want to work for. That's your dream job or dream company.
Right.
But I believe more in the latter part of it, like how do you make the best out of what is given to you? And I say that especially in today's environment, and as organizations are getting leaner and simpler. As I was waiting for you, I was, so I use Microsoft Copilot, which is AI, generated, assistant, for lack of better terms, a lot. And I was, putting prompts into it to see what else I can do for my current job. And it has evolved so much. I can I can go to Microsoft and to create me a presentation, a 15-slide presentation for something that I want to do today. So my point is, like, it's getting leaner with a lot of new technologies. And I know people use AI left, right, and center these days. But human beings are human beings, and that's a whole different thing. But I think it's very important to make the best of what you have as well, right? So I think that's where, and I've been in more than one scenarios. I've been in that situation where, you were kind of like in a spot where everything was like comfortable, and all of a sudden, like you said, there's change happens. And how do you make the best out of that particular change?
Right.
Do you pause there and stop, and start whining and complaining and kind of thinking about what happened, or do you pivot immediately and see like, hey, this is the positiveness that's out of it? I can tell you, in all the occasions that I've gone through, it actually worked in my best interest.
Okay.
It actually worked for me. I was able to get through that with promotions and more opportunities and so on. So dream jobs could exist. Hey, my dream job is to work for XYZ company or be at, XYZ position. But I think it's, again, also making the best out of what you have as well.
Adaptability goes back to the same thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the relationships that you make within it. Well, that actually brings up another point. Oftentimes, people have difficulty creating necessary relationships so that they can be more productive or at least happier in their role due to silos. That happens all the time. And sometimes they're necessary. Like, you'll have a research and development department intentionally siloed so that they are not affected by the sales and marketing team, because that happens all the time. But for the most part, silos are a bad thing because they keep people apart that perhaps would benefit if they actually interacted with each other. From putting on your HR hat, what would be your response to someone that says, I'm completely siloed. I know other departments exist. I don't really interact with them. And when I hear about interactions, it's usually, there's a certain friction. It's not openly hostile, I would assume, for most people, but there's enough of a friction to deter you from exploring it more. What would you say to that individual?
I would say that I don't think you can kind of classify an entire department as not open or something. Could be the leadership in that particular department. It could be a few people in that department that has, and let's be honest, that happens. That is very much prevalent in the corporate world and so on, right? That does happen. But a vast majority of the people are open to talking to you, sharing ideas, right? And this is my personal experience. I've really seen both sides. People not ready to open up, not ready to share information. But there is someone else out there who's ready to work with you. So I think for the message would be like, if you are that person who really wants to get out of the silo, it's all on you.
Okay.
Don't expect someone to pat on your back and say that, hey, buddy, you're in a silo, let me help you out, get out of this, right? No one is going to do that in today's world.
Right.
So I think it's up to the individual to really not be siloed. So it should be a very conscious effort that how do I really get out of this cubicle that I'm in and get out, walk around my department. And this is a very good question because, you'll be surprised to see like how many people don't know anything beyond the cubicle. Think about a scenario where you've gone to an organization and you asked someone for directions. All they know is the first floor that they work in. They don't know anything beyond the first floor. You don't even know what's happening in your building, right? That's a sad state. So I think it's up to the person to really be proactive and see like what else is happening out there. Maybe there is something happening on the 5th floor that really jives with what my end goals are, and maybe that's where I need to get in, right? So if you're not really getting out of the silos, personally, then I think you're missing out on a lot of opportunities. And don't be put off by like a few people who will probably not share the information. And there could be various reasons people don't do that. Maybe it's nature, maybe there is, many reasons behind it without going into the details. But I believe there's always people out there. I'll give you one example. It doesn't really, may not fit into, the current topic, but when I went into healthcare, I reached out on LinkedIn. Now, as soon as I got the job, I immediately went and started researching everything on healthcare. Obviously, I did it before the interviews, of course.
Right.
I could tell you exactly all the things that Medicare and Medicaid would look into as far as training and development is concerned. I mean, where does they cross path, right? Like, what do you need to do? Where do hospitals or doctors or physicians would get the best reimbursement for their services? What are those KPIs, key performance indicators? So it's all about patient experience, believe it or not.
Yeah.
That's why I said there's a lot of transferable skills between the two. So I had done all those work, and I knew that, maybe not all of them, but I had done that. But I needed to kind of like talk to people who were in the healthcare business, right? And see like, hey, you've been there for so many years. What's your perspective and so on? So I found this individual who was connected to me on LinkedIn for many years. So this wasn't like a tactical or a strategic move or something.
Just someone you happen to already be
just
connected
knew
to.
this person who happened to be in the hospitality space, left the hospitality space, and went to work for a healthcare organization.
Okay.
One of the topmost healthcare organizations in the northern states. I just reached out to him and said like, hey, listen, would you be willing to mentor me or give me some ideas? Or, how was you've been there for about 2 years, what's your take on this? How big was your move and so on, The person did respond to me, which that was a good thing, right? Because people may not do that. People may think this is solicitation or something. It didn't materialize beyond that, So I reached out a couple of times. I believe the person was interested in helping out, but maybe, other priorities get in the way or something. But that didn't stop me there. I reached out to someone else simultaneously. I don't believe in laying all your eggs in one basket. So while I was networking with this person, I was networking with some other person as well.
Okay.
And that person was willing to go beyond that initial stage as well, said, let me ask someone to get in touch with you so that we can match our calendars. We'll put something on the calendar. And indeed, we did put something on the calendar. Okay. And this was a senior vice president for a healthcare organization. So, so again, I was able to, someone who pivoted from hospitality into healthcare.
Right. So you have a lot of relatability here.
Correct. So again, getting out of your silo, I think, right? I mean, no one is going to come to me and tell me like, hey, get out of your silo, go and talk to someone else. It has to be your own initiative where you seek what's out there. So, and again, what's the most that can happen? People don't respond to you. That's it, right?
Well, times have changed. I mean, companies used to have a yearly picnic, and then they'd have a social, and then they'd have a holiday party, and maybe that still exists, but pretty much a lot of these other things have gone the way of the dinosaur.
Yeah.
And it's partly because the workforce has changed. There used to be a time where you would work somewhere and you're 18 and you're going to be retiring from this company with a gold watch and a thank you.
That doesn't happen anymore.
No, most people usually stay between 6 months and 2 years, depending on their position. So LinkedIn has kind of taken over the role of the networker on your behalf. You link into someone in accounting. Yep. They happen to be connected to sales. How do you suggest people use LinkedIn in order to expand their network? It's very easy to go to some sort of social event or work event, share QR codes, and now you have that person. But that's usually where it stops for most people. How do you manipulate this tool in order to expand that network further?
I think it's being, I'm not 200% active on LinkedIn, meaning I don't go there every single day and post stories or comments or what's happening in my professional life or something like that.
Of course.
But I think it's important to be active, to be aware of what's happening in, I go to LinkedIn every day. Mm-hmm. But to be aware of what's happening, what my network is up to, who's moving where, what are some of the changes and shifts happening in our industry or within our space of talent development and so on. Okay. So I think those are the things that one needs to be mindful about. And also really seeing like how people are going. I'm very curious. I think that's the number one thing I always tell my team jokingly, like, if you tell me something, if you tell me what is WOW, ways of working, and I don't know that, I will immediately go and Google it. I have no shame doing that, or I have no shame asking for someone what is WOW.
Well, you're adaptable.
Correct.
You're willing to learn.
Correct. And again, vulnerable as well. If I don't know, it's okay to say I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the number one thing, to really see like what people are doing, what people are up to, and really seeing like what else is there that you can do to be engaged. Mm-hmm. I think that's the number one thing, right? Because there is a lot of noise in LinkedIn.
Yes.
There are people posting a lot of content. There's a lot of solicitation of products and tools and so on. But how do you really tap into people who are really doing the right thing? And some content producers could be doing the same thing over and over again, and they're probably doing for their personal agenda, which again, I don't dispute, that's their goal. But I think kind of cutting off the noise and seeing like what really makes sense, who are the people who are really adding value, how do you support them, and so on, So I think that's a way to go,
Do you believe in going into someone's profile and seeing the friends that they're connected to in order to expand your network? Because I've seen that that's kind of something that's been going on the last few years, where I'll be contacted on LinkedIn by someone that is a friend of a friend of a friend. And I'm like, we have no interaction. We're not geographically. We didn't go to the same schools. Yep. I went to Harvard. They went to Arizona State. Like just complete opposites for everything.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of at odds what to do with them, because in one sense, they would be an expansion of my network to an unknown area. But at the same time, it's a network I'm not familiar with because I'm not familiar with the person. So what are your feelings with that? Because you seem to be keen on pruning, on getting rid of things that create noise.
Yeah.
But what about expanding through these indirect ways?
I think there are two strategies. So I purposefully do not go and seek out connections based on like, hey, Alex is connected with me on LinkedIn. Let me see his second and third connection and connect with them, just because I can connect with people. Sure. I don't do that. I'm very purposeful in terms of like whom I connect with. But if someone reaches out to me based on maybe your third connection or your second connection, not second, but your first connection reaches out to me and says like, hey, we're connected, with Alex, and, if it's a space that I want to be in, or if it's a space that I don't know, I would still do it as long as they're not soliciting something. And again, don't get me wrong, even for people who are trying to sell something, and you know this very well in the very beginning, if they're trying to sell something based on their title and position. And I've been a seller in my life, so I have a lot of respect for that. I always respect sales. I always respect housekeeping people, because I did work in housekeeping in hotels. So I always try to be mindful of the journey that I have come through. So I'm not trying to shoo them away, but again, I want to be mindful about like, what are they selling? Are they selling me something? And I have always accepted some of those requests because I'm curious to learn about something.
Okay.
About 4 years ago, I believe, there was this company that is based out of Texas that 4 years ago used AI in recruitment services. And I knew right from the get-go that my organization was not ready for that in recruitment. Okay. But I did engage with that person. Okay. It was a she, and I don't remember her name right now, but she's on LinkedIn with me. Okay. And I engaged with her and said, like, listen, and I was very honest, and don't bank on me to get a sales. Probably, it's not going to happen, but I'm curious about this because you know what? There's no guarantee I'm going to be in this organization for life, right? I might move. Things might change in my organization in the next 5 years. So I want to know more about your product. Tell me more so I can educate myself. And maybe if someone else is looking for something, maybe I can tell about your product, right? So, and I've spoken about the product to other people. I have never used that product in my organizations. But when I go and talk to people, I say that, oh my God, there is this product out there that could make your life so much more simple that it really connects, as long as the right permissions are there, it can connect with the recruiter to the applicant and really schedule everything all the way from the Zoom call to the calendar blocking and so on. One of the things that kind of like I always think twice is like when a recruiter reaches out to you and say like, what what are the days that you're available? Here is my availability and so on. Why don't you just share your calendar, like something on Calendary or something like that? Show me what your availability is, and I know what my availability is, and I don't need to talk to you. I can just pick up a spot that you and we both are available. So this technology was like kind of like, I would say, a few light years before all this thing came up. So I accepted, long story short, I accepted that invite just so that I could know more about that, a space, So there is nothing wrong in that, as long as you're mindful about like what is noise and what is like a good way to add. But I also believe proactively when I seek connections, I want to be mindful about like the space that other person is operating in. Is it someone in the learning and development space? It doesn't mean that I have people only from L&D space in my network. I have people from all different walks of life, But again, I want to be mindful about like where am I connecting, what my priorities are and so on.
All my coursework in management and leadership by extension has had strong industrial organizational psychology components to it. A lot of optimization and talent management. So just like the buzzword of the last year has been AI, the buzzword in HR and structural human resources for the last 5 to 7 years has been DEI. And DEI means different things to different people. And it's ironic because the original purpose of DEI is not even the way that it's defined nowadays, because it has morphed into its own separate thing with its own culture, in different definitions for it. One of the purposes, or at least originally, was in order to expand diversity for the purpose of expanding profitability. Because if you have a homogeneous group, they're going to all think the same way. They're all going to act the same way. They all went to the same schools. They all went to the same, live in the same neighborhoods. They're going to come up with the same ideas. So at that point, you don't need 20 of them. Just one will do. And so the idea was to expand that group's background so that you can have a little bit of everything. And this is all supposing that everyone's rightfully qualified so that they could do it. Inclusion is also part of that in order to make them feel part of the organization. And that's something that all companies struggle with. I was curious to know your position on assessments. There are a lot of different assessment tests, like the Big Five, Myers-Briggs, and whatnot, where they're like questionnaires, they're like surveys, but also they could be done as an interview. It could be translated into an interview format to do it.
Yep.
What are the things that you're looking for in individuals apart from the right background as far as schooling and grades and training and certifications? I mean, apart from the obvious, what are you looking for in the human? Because a lot of individuals that are either just got their bachelor's degree, they're 22, they're ready to conquer the world, or they're 42, just picked up a master's, they're thinking about a doctorate, and they're pivoting, and they're finding that they're facing the same troubles that the 22-year-old. How do I apply for a job? How do I get on LinkedIn? How do I do that first interview? Because I've been working at the same company for 10, 15 years. What are the things that senior management is looking at in applicants, truly, from your perspective? Because, it's not just someone that does the job, right? There's a lot of other personality components to it. So what's your opinion on that, as far as what's important?
I think the most important thing is like being prepared for that journey, right? And again, most of us are not prepared for that journey. I mean, if you were to put me on a spot and tell me like, Alex, go and apply for an interview, I might be on the spot too. I need to consciously prepare for that interview and for that entire journey of applying for a new job. So, and that's why, again, you seek help from more experienced people.
Okay.
That's where you seek help from the experts, for lack of better terms, maybe someone who's a hiring leader or a hiring manager in an organization and so on. And what are the do's and don'ts of some of these things, right? Like say, for example, when you're attending an interview, like, I know the person being interviewed is supposed to talk, I don't know the ratio right now, but 80% of the time or something like that. I get it. But they should also know when to stop talking.
Okay.
So some people talk too much, right? So, and I can be one of those people. I can talk too much during my interview. So if I'm being interviewed,
I dispute that, by the way. You're very measured. I give
again,
you
it's
that.
a very conscious effort as well, right? So
Yeah.
how do I meaningful? Not that I'm conscious right now, but I think it is. If I'm at an interview, right, and I'm interviewing for a job, I have to be very conscious and mindful that I stay on the topic.
Mm-hmm.
I limit my conversations to that particular space. Not that you're being a robotic person,
Yeah.
but I know, but really adding value to the questions. And again, I like it to be more of a conversation versus kind of like a questionnaire. Here is what you do,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So I think, again, kind of like really looking back into your own self and seeing like what your drawbacks are, what your limitations are,
Mm-hmm.
what your areas of opportunities are. Like I know that's one area that I need to focus on, right? How do I stay within the span of like 2 to 3 minutes per answer or something like that?
Okay.
So I think that's kind of like,
is that a good amount of time for you? You think, as far as exchanges are concerned?
yeah, I think that's what it is, because people don't have the luxury of like 1 hour these days. Most of the interviews that happen these days is about 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
at least the first few interviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
The phone call is about 30 minutes. The first call you may have on Zoom or Teams with the hiring leader might be 30 minutes. And when you kind of move into the next stage, these days, everybody has a panel interview. It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of the norm. Again, especially with Zoom, it's much more convenient, Zoom or Teams. So you're kind of like on a panel with about like 4 or 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
That might go to 45 minutes or an hour.
Oh,
And
you have more people. Right?
Yes. And 1 hour goes by so fast. And people want to know more about you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very important that you don't go for like 15 minutes with one answer,
Mm-hmm.
and limit yourself. That's why I say that I know that's an area that I need to consciously work on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very mindful about that. So I think that's one area to look for. And again, knowing and researching the company is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that is very important. And again, being a little humble, I think, is very important as well. I mean, people are looking for leaders for sure,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, not every position is a leadership position, right? Sometimes you might be hiring for a individual contributor, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are hiring for a leadership position, again, you don't want to come off as like the strong A+ personality
Mm-hmm.
that is ready to conquer the world tomorrow. You want to show your leadership skills.
Mm-hmm.
You want to show the tenacity and the adaptability and the, hey, I can pivot in 5 seconds. I can drive at 200 miles per hour if the need is there. But again, being a little bit more poised and, being aware of your, behaviors and those kind of things.
So the presentation.
I think the presentation is very important.
I think people don't appreciate how much a first impression counts for that.
Yeah.
Let me talk about your education. You mentioned it before, and of course, I'm fully aware of it. But tell me about, I assume that you got your bachelor's because that's the starting point for everybody.
Yes.
But what caused you to make the decision to go for the master's and then later the doctorate?
Competition.
How so?
Because when I got my bachelor's, this was in India,
Mm-hmm.
bachelor's, and I came to the United States, and I was working here for many years, and then I realized like everybody has a bachelor's degree.
Mm.
How am I going to be different from the other person? So in 2 years from now or in a year from now, when I apply for a job or I'm looking for a career change or I'm trying to do something different, what is going to differentiate me from the other person?
Okay.
And in my world, the biggest thing is like education.
Okay.
So I think education, I mean, that's the first thing people look at, right? I mean, that's not the only thing, but one of the first things people look at is like, okay, what's the qualifications, right? So the market was flooded with undergraduate degrees. So, and again, from my background and the way that I grew up, I was all about education and pursuing. My goal was what is the maximum that I can do? And I don't think there's any limits to it,
Mm-hmm.
but, so I had a bachelor's degree and I said, okay, what can I do to get an MBA degree?
Okay.
And going back to college, when you're working full time with a family, with kids and so on, is very difficult. And believe it or not, I missed the first assignment, almost missed the first assignment. But then I realized I'm paying a lot of money to this particular college to be in this MBA program. And I almost missed my assignment. And I could have got like a a grade D or 0 for that, and I'm paying from my pocket. I mean, that's really stupid, right?
You paid for that D. You paid for that 0.
I paid that. That's a good way of putting it, right? I paid for that 0. I mean, that's stupidity at its best, right? So I had to immediately pivot, and I remember vividly that night. So I had to immediately pivot and come up with like, here is going to be my timetable. I'm working from X hours to X hours. This is my family time. This is what I need to do. I'm going to carve out time each night or each evening from this time to this time to make sure that I'm present for my education. I'm available. I put everything on my calendar and so on. So it happened once, and that's it, right? And to continue with your question is like, so I got my MBA program and I was there, and I got my MBA in 2013.
Okay.
And within 2 years, by 2015, I was already thinking about my doctorate program. It took me 3 years after I started thinking in 2015 to get enrolled at FIU for the DBA program. And that was, again, based on several reasons. Like, I was looking at like there's very few DBA programs available across the United States. They're very expensive. How do I fund my educational journey? How do I reach out to resources that can potentially help me? And I won't go into the details, Alex, but I can tell you very confidently that I have paid for my education only this much. It's a very small piece of the pie. I was able to fund the vast majority of my education through resources that's available out there.
Great.
So,
well, these are resources people aren't aware of until they're in the situation.
Correct.
Then all of a sudden you quickly become an expert with the research.
Correct. So I wasn't a big fan of going back to college and taking a major loan and paying it over for, 10, 15, 20 years. And I was also very conscious about what is the ROI that I will get out of a college doctoral degree. Am I going to make more money? I mean, obviously I make more money, but what is the ROI? But again, there are so many resources available out there that I think we all should tap into and use. I mean, you could be part of a minority, community, and maybe there is some funding available out there that the community provides for first grade, for first-time students going into college or something like that. Why aren't you tapping into that, right?
Right.
Like so those kind of things, right? So I was able to take advantage of all those resources to make sure that that was the way my doctoral program was funded. But again, the point was like, I had an MBA and I was kind of thinking like, I have a lot of competition because everybody has an MBA.
Well, because now you're going for different positions.
Correct.
And now at this level, everybody has an MBA.
Correct. And I'll tell you right now, everybody has a doctoral program right now.
Well,
so
times change.
Times changed. I can tell you there's a lot of leaders who operate in this space, when you're looking at, learning and development space, having a doctor of education or a PhD, or I rarely see DBAs because DBA is such a small niche area.
Well, it's somewhat new. I mean, it started as a PhD
yes.
out of Harvard, and someone somewhere said, well, why don't we make this a professional doctorate, much like a doctor or a lawyer, a physician or a lawyer, and shrink it down because you don't need to spend 3 years to work on your dissertation. We'll do it in 1 year and then go from there. And honestly, I was stuck when I'm contemplating, because right now I'm finishing my master's and I'm contemplating whether to, go to Oxford and do a doctorate in management, which their program at Said is just amazing, or come here to FIU. And I am geared toward going to FIU, both because of my wife, all my associations, everything says, don't be a putz. Go to Miami. Go to FIU.
Yeah.
And it's an excellent program. People don't give it the credit that it deserves. So what has been your experience with a doctorate of business administration? Because it is such a high level degree compared to what's out there. How has it given you an advantage? What is the feeling when you're dealing with other individuals, C-suites that are talking to you, even from competing companies? I mean, how has been the experience for you with this DBA?
It gives you a lot of credibility, and for lack of better terms, people value and respect, that education and that training, for lack of better terms, the educational training, I mean to say, that you've gone through. So, you don't look at certain things the same way. Like before the DBA program, I'll give you a simple example, you tell me to create a survey, I could create a survey in 10 minutes, you know, and I'm pretty sure people do that today as well. You know, someone tells you to create a survey can be created in 10 minutes, especially with AI, right?
It's almost like cheating.
Correct. But then you really go into, and I get the point that not every survey you do in the business world, you can go with like reliability and, you know, validity and so on, right? I mean, you know, it takes time for all these things, right? But at least having the mentality of like, you know, what are some of the best practices you need to keep in mind as you're designing some, you know, something that you're trying to elicit out of the other person. So I think so I think that training piece that, you know, people do appreciate that, that this person has gone through some rigorous training. And I mean rigor with a lot of emphasis on it, especially the program at FIU is AACSB accredited program. And that comes with its own distinction because there's not a lot of programs that do that.
Oh yes, I've seen the paper mills out there.
Yes, I've seen
that. They
will
will give you a degree for the right price, but they're not accredited. You don't learn anything from it. You have no network that you can rely on.
Yep.
And it's kind of sad to watch, you know, these poor students, you know, in effect be defrauded. And then here's a shining beacon of an example of the right way to do it, which is FIU.
So I had done a lot of research, you know, with a lot of different universities across the United States to really see which is a DBA program. And that was kind of one of the reasons why I kept on pushing it for 3 years since the time I had this in my mind that I want to do a DBA. And I did share this with my family as with my wife as well. Like, you know, I want to do a DBA program. It's going to be expensive. How are we going to fund it? You know, because it's not just a tuition, right? You're traveling to this location because every DBA across the US is almost on the same model. You know, you're meeting like once a semester or maybe twice a semester or every other weekend. You know, you need to travel to the city. You need to stay in a hotel. You need to, you know, look for food and so on, you know. So these costs do add up, you know.
Yes,
and you're taking time away from work as well. So there's a lot of those things that, you know, some of them could be on a Fridays and so on, you know. So it's not necessarily on a Saturdays. You know, I can tell you for sure there's no college that works on a Sunday. So it's usually a Saturday and a Friday. So there's a lot of those kind of things that comes into the play. So that's why I kind of kept on pushing this. And when I saw FIU on the horizon, FIU was coming up with the first inaugural program, you know, everything just worked out, you know, the price point for me, being so close to where I live, you know, I wouldn't say a short commute, but relatively, right? I can take this over flying into some a different destination. I think all those things just made up. And, you know, the fact that it is accredited, you know, from AACSB, which my MBA is not. So again, it was a very conscious decision that should I plan to be in a teaching world at some point of time, I want to make sure that my doctoral program is AACSB accredited because then I can teach anywhere.
Well, it's almost like the credibility of that last degree covers all the previous ones.
Correct.
So that you're kind of safe. In my case, I went the other way. I went Harvard, and then now I'm going to FIU. But it's all in the same tier. People don't understand that it's not about like Ivy versus Southeast versus Northwest. It's that we're all part of the same accreditation and thus the same standards are being met, which are very high. So good to know. Let me start wrapping up by asking you this. You have an individual that's in their 30s, maybe 40s. They're looking to pivot, you know, into a new direction. What advice would you give them as far as what they should be conscious of or concerned with as they move forward?
I don't think there is much to be concerned about. You know, I think you know, it's just something that's out there in the mind, and you know, I know there is a lot of noise out there, and most of them could be true too, in terms of like people having bias towards people who are, you know, like a little older and so on, right? But I think at the end of the day, it all depends on you. I mean, I came to the United States when I was almost 30. And I'm not going to tell you my age, but you can just imagine that coming into the United States when I'm literally 30 and working, going back to college, you know, and I've been in the workforce in the United States for more than 20 plus years now. So you can add up. So I think certain things could be a block in your mind. Again, there could be people out there with some perceptions and say that, you know what, hey, you know, maybe we have, I don't want to hire an older workforce or something like that. There could be people out there. But I think as far as you're concerned, how do you push yourself and portray yourself in the right way? I think that's important. It all starts with like you polishing yourself, staying up to date with what's going on in the world, right? I mean, today, and I'm not saying that you have to bring AI into your conversation, but
at least be familiar
with it, right? Like I was speaking to someone the other day about Copilot and AI, and they were not aware of it. And it happens, it's fine. But again, if you are in a particular level in an organization, you would expect people to know about ChatGPT, Copilot, and
at least the
Gemini, and so
at least the general basics of how it works.
So, and it's okay to not to know. I mean, I don't know everything, and I'm not claiming I know everything. I don't think there's anybody who knows everything. But the point is, like, how do you kind of like upskill yourself, right, and bring you up to speed with what's today's requirements and needs are? Because that's something that you can't ignore.
Right.
I mean, you can't go into a workforce today for the vast majority of the jobs and be, I don't know, and say that I don't know about AI or I'm not ready to work with AI, because, that is the future, whether we like it or not, whether we agree or not, that is definitely going to be a part of it. So I think those are all the things, not sitting and saying that I'm 30 plus, or I come from a country where I didn't have an education in AI or something like that. Just upskilling yourself, being up to speed, polishing yourself, polishing your skills, looking at your resumes, preparing for interviews, having a mentor. I think these are all good tools that one can equip oneself with to kind of break those barriers. And when you go there, and I have, not that I claim to be someone, but I think I've broken some barriers in terms of like, coming from overseas, being in this market, and, making a mission to different markets, different industries that I wasn't part of. Like, I mean, getting into HR itself is very, very difficult, and then, breaking into different markets within HR, different industries of HR, like hospitality, healthcare, and now a completely different market right now. I think, you work for it and you work hard, I think it will come along. And that's not a cliche statement, I believe.
No, it's the truth. You got to keep working on yourself.
And I also believe a lot in luck and being in the right place at the right time. And sometimes it just wasn't meant for you.
Right.
And I think that's the way to look at it as well. I know it's hard, and I've regretted, and I've not regretted, but I've kind of like, I keep on asking, like, why didn't I get that? I go with the attitude that I was the best. Right. So it's very difficult to take it out of my mindset. But, I get over it after a couple of days, and, and it wasn't meant for you. It wasn't meant for you, but I'm going to push forward and see what else is out there.
Well, I mean, I can honestly say that you're one of the few people I know that you seem to have handled the challenges so well that they have almost become dares for you. How do I dare overcome them in order to move forward? And when I see your success, it's kind of hard to ask you, what has been the thing you've suffered the most as a result of your, striving for excellence? Because you're with your family, you're alive, you have your health, you have your career. You seem to be outwardly doing quite well. Is there something that you feel that perhaps is an anxiety that exists as a result of being at the level you're at? Or is it that by the time you get to that point, like you're scared to climb Mount Everest, but you do so much training that by the time you get to the summit, it doesn't affect you anymore because you've been acclimated to it?
Yeah, I think, just go for it. And, I think, I don't have any major anxieties. I mean, I would have anxieties like we all have as human beings, right? Thinking about, family, our kids, or, my kid is a senior in college. So
anxiety.
Yeah, so she will be graduating next year. So I'm kind of like worried about her future. What is she doing? What her grades are, and so on. So I don't know. Again, I probably could be involved too much. I'm always looking at the grades, even though she's in college and so on. Maybe not everybody's doing that. So everybody's definition of anxiety and things could be different. But I would say just go for it. One quick story I'll tell you. Like, I actually got a job in Miami at one point of time, and I actually worked in Miami. And it was a great opportunity, and a great shift from what I was doing. But the commute was something that I had in my mind. So I live all the way in in Parkland, and coming to Miami on a good day would be like close to 1 hour with no traffic. Like today, it took me like 50 minutes to get here with no traffic. So, and the place was pretty much close to this area. So it's not very far from FIU campus for the context. So I told my wife, like, listen, and this was many, many years ago. I had 2 young children. I had to pick them up from school and so on. And my wife said, just take the opportunity. We'll figure it out. And she was working only like 3 days a week. She worked 12-hour shifts, but was working only 3 days a week. So I had to work only for like a couple of days a week, right? 2 days a week, I had to worry for like, who is going to pick up the kids from school,
Sure.
Who's going to bring them home and so on. And believe it or not, Alex, as I was tendering my resignation to the company that I worked for, one of the employees there heard about the resignation. I mean, it was the same department. And, and this was an employee that worked, for a long time in there as well. And, that person jokingly said, you know what, anytime you want me to watch your kids, let me know, And I took on it.
Oh.
So I had a babysitter.
That worked out.
That worked out for me, right? So I was probably in the right spot at the right time. I said yes to that particular job without knowing or without having the safety net of a babysitter or who will pick up my kids from school. But, had I said no to that, thinking about this, I may not have been, in the right direction,
Right.
for lack of better terms. So again, you have to make some small sacrifices, some risk, some calculated risk. I mean, I had backup plans in mind, So I said, okay, this and this, so-and-so friend is going to pick up on a Friday, so-and-so friend is going to pick up on a Thursday, or whatever the case is. So again, relationships are important. So I had goodwill. So people were ready to help me out. But again, I said yes to that. And then luckily this happened. And she was a great resource. She took care of my children, worked with our, timings and everything to make sure that, the kids were picked up from the school. Not too many people do that. I mean, you can have a babysitter, to take care of your kids, but picking up from school and so on. So, again, I'm really grateful to those people as well. And they're all part of my LinkedIn connection. I still talk to those people as well. So
Relationships.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much for doing this. I know that you're going to be helping a lot of people with the simple advice that you think it is massive of an impact
Thank you.
that it'll have on others. So adaptability, say yes to opportunities,
Indeed. Yeah.
keep polishing yourself, all those things. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Collaboration and connection are at the heart of success. Take time to foster relationships and build teams that inspire and uplift. This episode is dedicated to the educators and leaders who invest in the next generation, shaping a brighter future for us all. I'm Alex Ponce. Join us next time for more inspiring stories and insights.